My name is Eden Alson. I'm 17 years old. I live in New York City with both of my parents and my grandma. I go to Grace Church School. I'm a senior, so I'm applying to colleges this fall. Earlier this month, well, actually, at the very start of the month, I released my second novel, um, called Far From Here, and uh, it's been a very interesting process, but I'm really happy that it's out in the world. Uh, I'm interested in writing, obviously, but also um, filmmaking and acting and singing and a lot of artistic endeavors. Um, and I'm probably going to be some sort of artistic or um, maybe slightly politically based major in college. But I have to get in first.
Did you always have an affinity for writing and reading because you grew up in a family that has, besides your parents, has you also have other relatives that do that? Was that like, sometimes people say, well, I don't want to do what my family does. Like if you come from a doctor, a family of lawyers and doctors, you may want to become a writer. How did you balance that out?
Well, both of my parents are writers, but I think they made a conscious effort to not like force me into being interested in writing, but they did want me to learn to read early and give me an appreciation for reading and books and all that kind of thing. And I did. I really took to reading really pretty. I don't know what the average age to learn to read is, but I was a little bit younger. I was like 4 or 5. Um, and I've always really loved to read. I there's a lot of pictures of me on the back of my dad's bike going somewhere, and I'm just reading. And or there's one picture of me in when we were in Italy, and there's this beautiful museum in the like we're in a riverboat, and there's this beautiful museum in the background, and I'm just sitting there like with my nose in a book that I'd already read 4 times by that point. um, so that's just always been something that has really meant a lot to me, and I think I don't really know, I can't really remember when I started writing, but I do have like a mild form of dysgraphia. So when I was a little kid, I really hated writing, like handwriting things. And that sort of turned me off of it when I was younger. But once I learned that, typing was a thing and I didn't have to handwrite everything I wrote, um, I started writing short, like, well, the beginnings of longer stories is like the best way to put it. Not short stories because they weren't complete in any way, but the beginnings of longer stories, like on my computer.
The actual process of writing is a very difficult process. And did you take to that? Did it seem like something that you were just capable of doing, or did you have to work hard at refining your craft?
Um, I think that writing, or I don't think that scene writing or like writing dialogue or descriptions has ever been particularly difficult for me. I think I like the concept of writing an interaction between two characters, or the, or describing a moment in someone's life or something like that, that has never really been difficult for me. I think it just sort of comes naturally. Um as I don't know, more maybe just as a result of viewing, of like observing people and my own thoughts and just like how I view the world and think about things. But I think that what is difficult for me is plot. Like, I could write a whole bunch of nothing until, until the cows come home, but I like the thing that I have a real problem with is I need like a structured, is coming up with a structured plot. So also I make things like overly complicated for myself. I always want to do like two perspectives, or two like timelines, or like lots of different character voices, or like third person, first person, blah blah blah. Um and I think like in my most recent book there's most of it is first person, but then for some reason at the end, there's two separate chapters where I just throw in a third person narrative, because I don't know, nothing can be simple, I guess. And it's stuff like that where to me it's like interesting, but for some people it might read as a little bit like out of nowhere or complicated, and also just plot elements that aren't always clear. Like for the I'm trying to write something now, and I actually wrote out a whole like plot summary, like breaking down each chapter, and I still can't really get it together. So that's the kind of thing I struggle with. But the actual writing part, I don't find as difficult.
So I can send you all my plot ideas that I can't execute, right?
Sure, yeah,
I,
I'll
I
take
I
it.
have a good one. I think you'll like it.
Send them to me.
Yeah,
Oh
no,
no,
I think I did send it to
she'll
you, Allison. I
yeah.
don't think you jumped at it. It's the
really?
one about the patches that you put on people's heads and they can learn to access data. And I,
It,
I actually wrote it in the last century, but now it's coming closer to actually being true.
I just want to interject and say it's interesting to me, Eden, that you say you have problems with plot and story, because I think your sense of story and plot is so advanced. And you know, one of the things that has always struck both your mother and I is whenever we're as a family watching a movie or a television show, um, Eden is always piping in with what is going to happen. Her sort of just instinctive sense of story is so strong, and I'm interested. It's interesting to hear that you think you struggle with that, because I think that's actually one of your strengths. So
What was the inspiration for your current novel, Eden?
Well, when we were first like locked down in March, it was a very like weird time because I don't think I was as affected by it as some people were, especially a lot of people my age. But it had just like um I don't know, like a lot of things that I had been looking forward to. My 14th birthday, my getting my braces off, getting into high school, all of these things were really complicated or, straight up ruined by the pandemic. And so I didn't feel necessarily like upset. But I did have, I think I was very, it wasn't like I was upset. Like there was a lot going on. And also it was just a very dark and scary time. And for some reason I started getting interested in a lot of like darker, true crimey topics at that time. And because I guess it was just easier to think about things that are definitely worse than what was going on. And I got really interested in cults and like cults, especially sort of like violent cults, and especially American cults. I know there's a lot around the world, but the ones that I was interested in were um, arguably like the big three of American cults, which were the Manson family, uh, the People's Temple, and uh, the Branch Davidians. Uh, and some of and for some I had been interested in that kind of thing in the past, but I really like ramped up my consumption of lots of cult media and cult um investigative journalism. Uh i i think it's fascinating. I think it's a very fascinating um part of humanity that people, a lot of people, whether they have a good upbringing, a bad upbringing, whether they're stable in their life or they're hurt or they've been hurt in their life or they have families or they're all alone, like anyone can be drawn into these groups. They're incredibly diverse. I'd say the Manson family is like the least diverse because it was mostly like poor teenage girls. But the majority of like larger cults especially have a lot of diversity within them. And so I was interested um less in the process of getting roped into something like that, and what it would be like to be born into that kind of situation, and what it would feel like to grow up in that kind of very intense environment, and what it would be like for that to suddenly be sort of taken away, as it always is an extremely sudden end to a lot of these kinds of communities, whether it be government involvement or the cult just sort of self-destructing or a crime being committed or something like that. So that was what I was interested in. And that's part of basically the premise of my book. Like, a girl is born in a cult, and then the cult is raided